You can find me upon the jet stream, fighting dragons, upon the seas wrestling krakens, gasping, spitting, reeling, biting, for the tales of heaven aren't told by those who take no risk, who risk the wonder of eternity for the comfort of today. I am no hero, nor have the hubris to lord over another, but as a steward of stories and a student of Jonah, I will no longer allow myself and others to find themselves in the bellies of Leviathan.
Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. I hope that you all are doing well. Hope that you all are taking care of yourself. You know, we got these guests rolling, and for the first time, I can't believe I'm saying it, for the first time this season, we have a poet on the show who's not a stranger to the show. He's been on the show before, a friend of the show. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, family? I'm Will Davis, also known as Tethered Words. And yeah, Terrence, we've been doing this for a while, right? At least behind the scenes.
Yeah. Introduce yourself to those who are not familiar with you, man. You got like a long list of things you can.
Yeah, I'll keep some. Man, listen, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to be a decent human being.
Yeah.
I'm trying to leave a legacy of like I have, my thing in life is my motto, I guess, is to speak life, inspire dignity, and do good. And so that's what I'm trying to breathe into my everyday, honestly, my everyday, but specifically in this context of poetry. And, I'm a human rights and immigration rights advocate, an educator, an author, and yes, a chaplain as well, a first responder trauma chaplain. And so that whole motto, again, to speak life, inspire dignity, and do good is really weaved in those different aspects that I get to be in life. So,
Man, welcome back. How was that trip to Africa?
yeah, and it's kind of wild that that's where we left off. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I told your people first before I told anybody else. Africa, so not just Africa, because Africa is a huge continent, right?
Yeah.
I was blessed and privileged to be able to go to fly to Uganda, to northern Uganda, visit there for a bit, and then drive across. Took a little puddle jumper, if you will, up to the northern part of Uganda, and then drove across into South Sudan. So a lot of adventuring there, but Africa was two things. It was both beautiful and hard. Okay. That trip there, beautiful and hard. And just the people were just beautiful. Their engagement with all of us was beautiful. The landscape and especially I was actually, it was a gift. They wanted to take us on safari, and I kid you not, Terrence, when I left there, I was telling everybody, if that's not heaven's front porch, I'm gonna be greatly disappointed. Because so Uganda is known as the Pearl of Africa.
Yeah.
And that even that name doesn't do it justice. It was absolutely gorgeous. Everything's larger than life. It's just a humbling experience, and it allows you to see that life is just wonderful. And yet at the same time, it's hard. Right? I don't speak the language or languages, so that was hard. Learning new culture and making sure I diminished in some ways my American attitude and insight, right?
Yeah.
Fighting against that, and I want to honor other cultures and other peoples. So just learn from them, to be led by them, right? Usually I'm a leader on a trip or on a consulting trip on whatever. This time I'm being led. This time communication is minimal because of cell phone signal isn't as good, or trying to get somewhere via a car or a motorbike or the back of a pickup truck. Like everything is just hard, a harsh landscape. And then specifically, I guess I should get into why I was there, but we were working alongside refugees in northern Uganda in UN camps. And then a little bit, actually, there were some connections we were able to make with some ministry partners that were starting what they called mother churches, which were
Okay.
basically like this hub where other villages and other tribes and even other smaller churches can come to this centralized location. And then from there, medication, educational supplies, water, things like that can then spread out to these smaller areas or more rural areas. And so it was just hard, but talk about a growing experience. Um, and especially, man, I was able to just meet with some people from the Dinka tribe.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, Matumbo, the Kembe
Yeah.
Matumbo.
Yeah.
He was from the Dinka tribe, right? So
Yeah.
just
Some
like
tall
these
people.
tall people, the kids were tall and lanky, and but like I mean, just deep, dark, rich skin, big smiles, just humble people. But yo, I'm not trying to fight one of them. I'm gonna tell you right now. I mean, they are powerful. So it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Just meeting, different cultures, interacting with them, and stuff like that. So
And I remember you sent me a couple of pictures, and even like just seeing the pictures, man. I think you sent me some video too. I was like, man, this is beautiful.
yeah,
I know this is not doing it any justice of
nah,
being there in person, man.
they took me. I was able to, because I got nervous at one point, but I got to dip my foot into the Nile River. So
Oh
I was like,
yeah.
I don't need an alligator to pop up and just bite my foot off. So I'm gonna just tap the water real quick
Just
and run
tap
away.
it.
People were out there fishing. I saw what Murchison Falls, which is like a feeder waterfall into the Nile. The people of South Sudan, as much as it was hard, even for them because of the civil war and war outbreak.
Yeah.
Khartoum, the capital of Sudan in the north, had just gotten back into a war scene with two generals fighting it out, and so that just ripples effects throughout the nation. Um, yeah, so it was hard, and some other thing, it was hard, but again, just a beautiful people, and holding on to a hope that something better is coming. Even the
Mm,
fact, in conversation on the ground, people through translators and everything, they still consider themselves, we are Sudanese. Right now Sudan is like Sudan and South Sudan.
yeah.
Some people were like, no, we are one people. We would love for us to see each other back as one people, not this, just this rift, this hardship, this warring, this, right? So even that was hopeful in a
Yeah.
way that I can't fully understand, right? But hopeful of like, there's a brokenness here and we want to see something be made right and be made well. So there was a lot of that.
That speaks volumes because the just being one group of people is like a
Mhm,
mindset that, and you spoke about this earlier, just going over there and reducing the American thoughts and being
mhm,
willing to learn and take in
mhm,
and understand.
mhm.
If people were more willing to do that where we actually live, things would be a little easier. I mean, it's,
Definitely be a little bit different if we talk
yeah,
about the current political landscape.
yeah, man.
Learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. It's like, it's crazy how there can be such a divide in one nation,
Hmm.
but if more people are willing to see that we are one nation, and that's in any country, it's life changing
It is.
and in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah. If everybody would be willing to at least see it from the other side, to say, you know what, I didn't know it at one point. I'm willing to be curious I'm willing to just ask more questions. Oh, I don't know it all in this context, or even like, you know what, I was wrong at one point. You know, whatever it is, but
Yeah.
like see it from the point of view from the other person, especially if they're like people have been doing work, you know. And I'm starting to learn this. Like, I'm not gonna argue with people anymore. One, it doesn't honor the other person to just sit there and argue, or
Mm,
for me to know a
yeah.
little bit better and give an intellectual smackdown. Like that still doesn't honor you, right? Um, Sometimes I'm like, here it is, here's a smackdown, but dang, you know, whatever. But um, I don't want to argue anymore. I want to bring in people that are curious into the conversation, even people that are like, you know, I really don't know, but what is this? You know, let me find out. I think the world is full of wonder, and we're missing it out because we're holding on to this is mine and this is
Yes.
not being taken away, whatever, this scarcity mindset on all levels. And it's partly of why we have the brokenness now, I believe, even in our own country.
I, I agree. I agree. And I think what gets people all riled up and stuff is like you can mix a few truths and a lie
Hmm.
and everybody will believe the whole lie is the
Yeah,
truth.
yeah.
And it's like there's no willingness to, like you said, see the other side or even try to understand. It's
Hmm.
like when people are searching for something, people feel lost. They sometimes will gravitate whatever sounds like what they need, but they don't actually sit there and look at it like,
Yeah,
okay, this may be what I think I need because this and that is happening, but are you looking at the other side? Are you looking at the short term and long term effects?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like you think that this sounds good, but then once it starts happening, you realize we need each other.
yeah,
This
yeah,
bottom line, we need each other.
yeah. And I'll say this, because I think some of your we're people of faith, and I think some of your listeners are people of faith, right? I think faith takes imagination, right? And so you have to be able to see and behold wonder in a different way, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise, to step into like, I don't really know all of this, but can I lean into, can I be curious? Can I say, oh, you know what? I don't know it, or I can't see it all, right? We don't. We have an invisible faith. So
yeah,
without imagination or stifling growth, stifling your faith, you're never going to see the beauty in someone else. And you're
mm,
never going to see that, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's a different point of view, but they might have something there, right? I think we're just, there's there's an aspect of humanity that I think people are actually afraid of freedom.
mm,
And what I mean is they want to put themselves into a box because of the unknown. And to be free is to be unshackled. To be free is to get step out of the box. To be free is to step out in faith, right? And I think people are afraid of that. And unfortunately, I believe that's also real in the church. We're afraid of freedom, right? Only
wow,
Peter stepped out of the boat. He
yeah,
set himself free, right? But yeah, did he fall in the water? Yeah, but guess what? But he stepped out of the boat.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's imagination. Like, call me out upon the water, Lord. I don't know how this works. I don't know what's gonna happen, but call me out. Anyway, I'm not preaching. My bad.
No, but that's so true, man. It wasn't until he doubted himself and
Hmm.
looked down, it was like that's when
Yeah,
he fell. It's just
right.
that
But he
faith,
went up
man.
there. But he went
Yeah.
up there.
You got to
So
be willing, and I never thought about that. People being afraid of freedom because that's what living inside a box is captivity.
it's captivity. We do it
Wow.
to ourselves. And Jesus came to set the captives free, and yet we sit there and put ourselves in bondage over and over again on different levels, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Wow. Yeah, man, you got me thinking. I never looked at it that way, man. From your trip, you've been several places since then, but what was,
yeah.
I guess if you could describe what, that was like what was something that you took away from that experience if you had to summarize it?
For Africa, and again, South Sudan and Uganda, I'm gonna say sacrifice.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of people in the UN camps who are making sacrifices of staying there away from family, right? Or leaving and saying, you know what, I'm gonna go back and fight for my family. Um, I'm gonna tell for believers. I'm going back into witch doctor territory, Muslim territory, other anti-Christian territory. That's sacrifice, right? To just tell of the good news. So sacrifice there, but also for Uganda, they have sacrificed in terms of land and time and resources, because they have said we're going to give land and time and resources to take in refugees. So
Yeah.
and not just from South Sudan, but from Chad and Darfur and the DRC. I mean, so many areas. And so you got so many people living in Uganda, and Uganda has sacrificed to say we're going to take them in. And so, and again, I don't know where people are with politics, but forget politics. We're talking about, at least we have a nation that's housing and caring for others, and that's something that takes sacrifice, right, and risk,
Yeah.
and the unknown. And so, um, yeah, that was huge for Africa coming back.
Since then, man, you've been a few other places.
Dude, logistically and just life, I had no idea I'd be doing all this. But yeah, in this past year, so I came back from there, a lot of life change and trying to figure out like next steps and navigate all that. But then I ended up going to Cuba right after, a few months later. That was kind of my first consulting trip. And again, being able to release what I thought I knew, or what I was told, or
Yeah.
what I have learned, or the propaganda I believed, right? To step into a world that's locked away in a time capsule. Um, Cuba was absolutely beautiful, but she was so worn and tired,
Yeah.
living in a shell of former glory, if you will. And yet again, the people want so much more. And so here I am, able to see the other side, and having to almost box away my American mindedness of communism and those people and the history and everything we're taught.
Yeah.
Always fall short of what is the next step, what's the rest of the story. And that the victor is always the one that tells the narrative, right? But that doesn't necessarily
True.
mean it's the correct narrative. And so here I am, trying a little bit as best I could see the rest of the story, get a fuller perspective. And so I just appreciated meeting some people down there, and that was their thing, um, changing the narrative, which falls along the line of like what I try to do, through poetry, writing, whatever. Is to change the narrative, give perspectives, something different. And they were trying to say, what, I would love to give Americans a different perspective of who we are, because they're only hearing it from secondhand stories, or
Yeah.
they're only hearing it from those that had left forever ago, and those are the stories they told their grandchildren. And it wasn't a story that was necessarily wrong. It was just, it wasn't complete, because those were stories for that time, right? And
Right.
that era and everything. And so it's an incomplete story, but that's all we're hearing. And so people on the ground now were like, we want to showcase and tell you something different, and we are not the same, still wrestling with a lot of things, but we are not the same, or we are people that want to change, but we can't. And then I got to, the why. So it was just, yeah, that was wild to be there, and just to see literally a time capsule, man. I was going back in time. I mean, the cars, the buildings, the
Yeah.
dress, the whatever, yeah, that was wild.
Man, it's it's interesting how people, like, when it comes to like negative perceptions or things that happened in the past, how people
Mhm,
hold on to it. Like, I
mhm,
can have conversations, and it sometimes not even negative things. It's just like people lock things in and just go with it. I have conversations with people who, in some cases, just act like I'm still that person when I was 8 years old. And I'm
mhm,
just like, man, we've grown so much. I've grown so much since then. Like of course, you hadn't may have not seen me since then,
mhm,
but like, how are you still harping on these things from a child, like childhood? And here it is,
mhm,
I'm a full grown adult. I've noticed people do that a lot, and it's just like, have you allowed yourself to be willing to understand and get to know the person? Because we could be different people from 10 years ago, but we're talking about like it's interesting the conversations I have with some people, and I'm just like, dude, I was like 7 years old. What are you talking about, man?
And it happens within, yeah, you talk about society, you talk about friends, it happens within families, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not the same. You hope you're not the same person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hope you're growing as
I
a
hope so too.
person. I hope you're living life. A little bit. I hope you're getting beat up and
Yeah.
then stepping up and be like, "Woof, let me not do that again." Right? Like those are
Right,
lessons.
right. Yeah, and I think just by
Yeah,
habit, people just do that. And if more people would be willing to approach situations from like a level of let me hear what you have to say, let me
yeah,
see where you're coming from instead of just jumping in like I know this, I know that. But do you
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Especially when you're relying on the media. I mean, they can spin stuff however they want to.
And they will. They will
Yeah.
spin. Right.
This has me thinking about when I was in college. I had a professor. I forgot what country he was from in Africa, but he was telling us that where he's from is a beautiful place. He was like, the soil is rich, the land is beautiful, and then they show all these images and stuff on TV. But he's like, every time I go home, I'm
Mm,
the only black person on the plane.
mm.
He's like, every
Bro.
time, and he said, if it's that bad, then why is everybody going over there?
Yes.
And I was like, wow.
There's- no, you're right. So there's an aspect of that. Again, I do immigration refugee work, right? Um, I'm a human rights advocate. And so, yeah, in my travels or in my studies, it's amazing the amount of people that are, right? As much as we are getting asylum seekers or people from these different countries, Americans don't realize the amount of expats. That's the nice word. Really,
Yeah,
they're immigrants in other lands, right?
yeah,
How many Americans leave to those same countries but can afford to buy the nice land, buy the lakes, in the jungle, right? Stuff like that. And they leave and they're living on the farm, in luxury, the fruit trees, right? Like all of that across so many different countries. Yeah, yeah. We never have that conversation.
yeah, man, you got me thinking about because I even seen like a while ago episode of I was just flipping through the channels and what is it? House Hunters International.
Oh, yep,
And these families and they're just like,
yep,
they're gonna move here or whatever because the American dollar is so much more. So they
mhm,
can afford to just uproot their whole family and
exactly.
just go. And they were looking at nice villas and I
Yep,
was just like, wow. But
yep,
here it is, the people who live there probably can't afford to stay those
right,
places.
right. They can't. And so, yeah, traveling. You just remind me when I was traveling to get to Uganda, I had to go through Doha, Qatar, and so I'm in the Middle East again. Perspectives, right? Another gorgeous Arab world, and yet I felt absolutely safe. Uh,
Hmm.
Nobody was looking at me differently, whatever. Um, but I was talking to a guy from Brazil who left Brazil, went there on a trip, loved it so much. And he was like, yeah, things are different. I got to follow different rules, whatever it is. But he's like, but I'm staying, and then he's telling, and again, forget politics, forget whatever. But 85% of the country are expats,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
but at least, and there's things like people go there for work and migrants for work and whatever. But like him as a Brazilian was like, you know what? Actually, I like it here and I'm gonna stay. And this kid, I mean, he was a kid. He was like 23 years old.
Wow.
And I was like, you got your whole life ahead of you from Brazil to
Yeah.
this. And he was like, I just wanted to escape it all, simple living. I can follow rules, right? Go and respect the different culture, learn how to live with amongst them, right? Like stuff like that. And so, yeah, that was just wild, something else to just see and be a part of. And Doha was, I mean, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely like a mix of futuristic world with the ancient world, like just something
Yeah.
really something I haven't really seen
Wow.
uh,
Okay.
in my travels. So,
So your first book, Threads of Resilience,
mhm, mhm.
since that's come out, I've seen you have a number of events with that book in hand, and
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, for those who are not familiar, let the people know about Threads of Resilience and the mission behind it.
Threads of Resilience is my journey across 3 years, from 2020 to 2023, traveling to the southern border, to the U.S.-Mexico border, and working alongside asylum seekers and refugees and it's a diverse group of people at the southern border, but that had to stay in Mexico as they're making their case or making their way to the U.S. And so the only way I could capture what was occurring or even just release the tension in my heart and mind was through poetry there. And so then from that stemmed this book, Threads of Resilience, when I was really just praying and trying to seek through next steps and what to do. I figured, you know what? Um, I don't think I want my first book to just be random poetry that I've written. I want it to be for the people and about the people and to change the narrative on this heavy issue of immigration. And so that's what it is. It's just stories I've captured, where I was, what I was thinking, what I learned. I don't shy away from my faith perspective and questions I have asked and stuff like that. And so that's what that first book is about. It's about weaving the human spirit through poetry and just showing that resilience of humanity.
Everything was captured beautifully in there. The poetry, the pictures you put inside. I mean, the book itself,
Yeah.
everything about it was beautiful, man.
You might be biased because you wrote a review, so.
But it was an honest review.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Yeah, it was an honest review. And you just recently came back from Mexico. How was that from
Dude,
the
yeah.
time before you wrote the book to the last time? How was that?
This was a very different world. It was so. This is where the conversation, you have to get political. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Because the last time I was there was literally MLK weekend last year, and so here I'm back MLK weekend this year, and it was the transition between for Trump 2.0, right? So
Yeah.
the transition from from Biden to Trump, and how things were already shifting on the ground without even him having been president yet. He was still president-elect over those few days, and everybody was just on edge, about the changes coming, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever it is. Everybody was on edge. Mexicans were on edge. Cartel was on edge. Like, everybody's just trying to figure out what to do. Asylum seekers are on edge. Advocates and lawyers are on edge because nobody knows within their context and their world. Everybody's trying to figure out what are the next steps. What are we navigating? What are we doing? But at the end of the day, as an advocate, as someone who's trying to be there for the other person, unfortunately, the vulnerable are the ones who take the hit yet again. And so that's what I was seeing, is those the women and children once again who are being, and now we see it. Trump has removed the CBP1 app, removed asylum, removing even what we were doing with Afghan refugees. Like, the vulnerable are beaten up, dehumanized once again, and that's a dangerous position for anybody. And so it was as an advocate, as someone who's in that world, as an educator who cares for multilingual learners, it was sad, angry in some regards, right? Like, just processing everything over that just this week, when I was there just this last weekend. So a lot of emotions there, man.
You talk about like dignity. Like, these are people, right? And that's always a thing that just, I'm like, is everyone missing that? These are human beings.
I think they are.
And I always go back to just thinking about, if anybody has a right to be on the North American continent, I mean,
you can't say that, Terrence. What's wrong?
I mean, Let's
What's
just
wrong
be
with you?
let's just be real. I mean, that's
Yeah.
always been a thought to
No.
me since like school. I
Yeah.
remember learning about the Aztecs in
Yeah.
school,
Yeah.
elementary,
Yeah.
and my first thought was, okay, so why is there a divide? Because I was that kid that asked those questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is there such a divide or whatever, what have you? If
Mhm.
the Aztecs were here, I mean, I can go off deep in with that, but this it's
All these
something to
people,
think about.
yeah, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas, right? Like the Incas,
Right,
so many those large people groups. Even at one point, understanding that half of America used to be Mexico,
right.
and now we doing dumb things like trying to rename the Gulf of Mexico. Like,
Yeah,
oh, yo,
yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah. It's
I get to meet a lot of those. Um, Actually, this is wild if your people don't know this. So, in terms of just immigration or migration, we'll talk about migration from
okay.
Central and South America. Um, a lot of the most vulnerable people, yes, women and children, but even more so than that, um, indigenous families are even more vulnerable, if you can believe.
Yeah,
And part of that is, um, Spanish might be, and is many times their second, even third language. The indigenous people, they speak like one or two indigenous, like ancient Mayan Aztec languages.
yeah, yeah,
And so then they learn, because colonization, right? Then they learn Spanish, you know, or something, and then they come up here and then they have to. So then they have to learn a third or fourth language. So imagine, you're going up to someone just because they speak Spanish, or they get hit with a, why don't you learn English? And it's like, bruh, they're learning their fourth language. Why don't you learn at least a second, right? So yeah, it's wild. It's wild. Even
yeah.
Mexico, yeah, they speak Spanish, but they have, I'm kid you not, something over like 200 dialects.
I saw
Yeah,
that. Interestingly enough, I was watching something about food. I know, don't judge me, but that's where I learned that.
yeah, yeah. So again, so there's just a rich world. Like, are we intrigued about the other, not fearing the other, not understanding that the fear narrative, they're trying to hold you hostage,
Yeah,
not trying to allow you to be free, right? Not allowing you to engage someone else. Um, there's a fear narrative that's being pushed and pressed, and we see it in the current culture. 3 days in, you see the language in the news, you see the language across social media. Like, um, yeah, we gotta be able to take back the humanity in all of us.
yeah.
As believers, we would say the image of God in someone else, right? But yeah, there's a lot of beauty and wonder out there, man.
You just have to try to stay positive and try to encourage people where you can.
Mhm.
I know it's kind of difficult and tiresome.
It is.
Um,
It is. I'm tired, dude. I,
yeah.
yeah, I am tired.
And it's just kind of goes back to what we said earlier about just maybe sprinkling a few truths in with a lie, and then you get people to buy into it. I
Mhm.
mean, when you think about it, it's weird to me how people are categorized
Mhm.
by things a few people do, as if all other groups don't have a small percentage of people who do the same things too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody's using their brains to be like, I mean, that's anywhere, nobody's using their brains to talk about the activities that happen, with people
Yeah.
who are legal citizens, quote unquote.
Right.
Nobody, you forget about that because
Yeah.
this narrative has been painted and that's all you're focusing on. It's just like,
Yeah.
come on, people, y'all can't
I
be
know.
that.
I know. But they are, because they're holding on to a certain level of comfort,
That's it.
not
Comfort.
willing to breathe out. And unfortunately, that comfort can become stagnant. And when
Mm,
something remains stagnant, it will stink and it will deteriorate. Bacteria, right? It's like water. When water becomes stagnant, it's bad for everybody. It can be a poison. And
wow.
so that's what we're becoming. We're becoming so inward focused, quote unquote, sheltering ourselves, creating false narratives of needing security. And not that we don't have security, that's not a thing, but like, we're creating a stagnant pool of poison for everybody, and we're drinking from that now.
Yeah. Like we talked about in the pre-show, things are being exposed that were there.
Yeah, I truly believe so. A lot of people are saying, I just have a different mindset, right? People are saying, "Oh, it's getting worse. It's getting worse." I don't think necessarily it's getting worse. I think that this stuff has always been there, but we had different dams, if you will, to keep the water analogy, right? We had different dams that held this stuff back, that hid a lot of this nonsense.
Yep.
And now everybody's dam or comforts, whatever they held out to, especially after COVID, everything broke. And it was like, whoa, these comfort things aren't actually working. They're no
Yeah.
longer there. And so it's just a big slosh of garbage all around that was just hidden away, you know. Kind of like when you turn the light on, you can kind of see the dust in the room right through the air. Right? The,
Yeah.
the dust was always there. We
Always.
just ended up shining a light in a right direction that now you see it, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what's happening.
I was going to say that about COVID and the pandemic. That was the turning point because everybody was forced to deal with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They were
Mm-hmm.
forced to deal with things that they had been sweeping under the rug. They were
Yeah.
forced to
Yeah.
deal with these different biases and things they had. And then some people, I mean, that was a traumatic time.
It was.
Like
It was.
we're all going through PTSD in some
Mm-hmm.
form or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just feeling the fire because there was that sense of like people who felt so powerful were helpless during that time.
Yeah.
And that was a time where we all were in the same boat.
Yeah.
As trivial as it sounds, I remember thinking about the NFL draft
Mm.
and when they had it and how it had to be remote. Because only the elite and the people who are going first
Right.
got to go to the exact, the actual thing. But now everybody's in the same boat and everybody is looking like each other. They're all there at home and doing like the teleprompting in or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no special treatment. And so now when it came to the pandemic, you have like everybody having to and also having to look out for each other. Of course, there was some tension and stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
against like, vaccine and masks and all that type of stuff. But in a sense, you had to look out for like your neighbors, like people who were communities. They had to kind of, okay, you may not be able to go out there if something's wrong, or maybe I need to bring you something.
Yeah.
Maybe you can bring me. So what can we do? Because I saw like neighborhoods doing different things, like coming out on the porch. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw in some countries where they had some people were opening their windows because they were on like real lockdown in other
Yeah.
countries. They couldn't even go anywhere. Yeah. But opening windows and playing instruments and just
Yeah.
being human.
Being human.
Yeah, and it's like I think a lot of that some people didn't deal with the things that they were experiencing during that time, especially the people who were isolated. They become so isolated that they think that their thoughts are the only thoughts
Mm-hmm.
that matter, the
Mm-hmm.
only thoughts that really have, any truth to them.
Yeah.
And
And the
that's
other thing
that's
is,
the other downside of that.
you're talking about that point of truth. I think everybody thinks of themselves as an expert on so many things,
Yeah.
and they're not learning or actually enough with the regurgitating somebody else's points of view, right? Like how does, right? Wisdom is knowledge and experience, put together, because then you're learning how to put some things, how to live life. But like everybody wants to be an expert on something.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, you're really not, and you're
Yeah.
showing your true colors or whatever it is.
Everybody wants to like nobody wants to learn anymore,
Yeah.
man. It's just like, it's there's always different ways to do something. Like
Mm-hmm.
my way may work for me,
Mm-hmm.
your way might work for you, and not necessarily mine. Or there could be a whole totally different way, different from what we're doing, that works best for both of us. But if we're not willing to have an open mind
Right.
and to be like, you know what, I don't know it all.
Yeah.
Let me see some other perspectives. Maybe I can learn something. Then you just be stagnant, like you said, and that water becomes foul.
Yeah. We're trying to clean it up, Terrence. We trying to clean it up.
Trying, man. We're trying to do our best, man. We're trying to get some filtration in there. We're trying to make this water drinkable, people. You
Living
working?
water. Living.
Yes. You working on a new book.
Oh yeah.
Before I let you get out of here, man, let's talk about this new project.
So this new project. So one place we didn't talk about after Cuba and before Mexico.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was in Ukraine on the front lines for 2 weeks.
Ooh, how was that?
That could be its own podcast series episode, bro. Woo! That was wild. Wild to say the least. Eye-opening.
Yeah.
I came back changed. Everything. I've been blessed. I think you can realize this by now. I've been blessed to travel a lot of places. But Ukraine stole my heart, man. People of Ukraine really stole my heart. So, yeah, that was terrible. Terrible, and yet an adventure that I will never. I would just forever be changed. I would forever be changed. We were able to do basically a medical trip with a team.
Okay.
ER doctors, medics, firemen, chaplains, chiropractor. A wonderful, wonderful organization called the Renewal Initiative out of Virginia. Led by Dr. Andrew Morose, who is Ukrainian American himself. And so when we were talking for a while about like what it would look like, we connected over refugee work, and also he realized I have some Ukrainian refugees and Russian refugees in my district, as so we just connected over that, what that looked like and stuff like that. And then we said, hey, can we build a medical team, right? Literal, physical, medical help, but also me as a trauma chaplain, and with some other chaplains, spiritual, right? Health.
Yeah.
And we were actually honestly able to serve soldiers, commanders, lieutenants, refugees on the front lines, and partner with people that were on the front lines serving. It's a hard place, a different kind of hardness than even the other lands I've visited. But there's still a hope that they're holding on to, man. There's still a hope. But yeah, it was a wild place. It was like going back to World War II. That's what I could explain. Like, have you ever seen the World War II movies with the equipment, the bunkers into the hillsides, the landmines throughout farmland, barbed wire, equipment, just everything.
Yeah.
Even how they ate and food rations, and the people that were hurting, soldiers that were hurting. Yeah, it was amazing. It was just, there was an amazement of like war and how that entails. And I definitely had to come back and meet with doctors and my friends who just kind of helped me unpack, decompress the trip. And so that was quite a different process. So because of that, the second book I'm working on is basically around war, hope, and how beauty heals. And so I will talk about my trips, and definitely have written some poetry from South Sudan, Uganda, Cuba, Ukraine, even a little bit of my time in Qatar, right? That transition there. But helping all of us to see the disaster of war, which you get it, but like, let's really face it. Because Americans, we move past war and war zones very quickly. Especially if it's not in the news, it becomes forgotten because we're not there. We don't have to deal with it. And then when it comes with getting their refugees or immigrants or asylum seekers, we really sometimes don't have to deal with it, because it's like, no, keep that over there. That's messy and that's ugly. Don't bring that to me. We just don't know how to deal with it, truly. Anyway, yeah, the juxtaposition of beauty within a war zone, beauty within brokenness, beauty within poverty, all that kind of stuff. What's that mean and look like? And what's it mean to hold on to hope and resilience again, and perseverance? So, yeah, it'll be a little bit of poetry, prose, and I'm going to try to add some historical narrative in there, to just talk about almost, I guess, answering the question, how did we get here? Without going into full history, because I'm not a historian, but just
Yeah.
learned. So that's kind of where we're going. That's where I'm going with it. So let's see what happens this summer, and if I can get it published by this summer. That's my goal.
Yeah. You you got it, man. It's enough time.
Thanks.
Man, you really get into the trenches, and that's one of the many things I appreciate about you. Like you
Thanks.
get on the ground, you do the work, and you bring something back from those experiences to help educate everybody else.
Yeah. I think, that has to go back to just my faith. I truly believe, dude, I love Jesus, okay? And I truly believe when you read Sermon on the Mount, when you read the Psalms, when you read just what he did, like to be led by the Holy Spirit, I think is going to lead you into dark places,
Yeah.
scary places at times, but like grace and truth and the light of the gospel, right, shines even brighter the darker it is. The colder it is, the gospel is warmer and brings compassion and mercy. And so I don't know what it means, but I just know as soon as I started this journey of immigration work and refugee work, it's been leading me to these different places. And I'm just rolling with it, man.
Yeah.
And you got to know yourself. And I know myself. And I've just been, I don't know, maybe my makeup kind of lends itself to those fringe or dark spaces. I don't know. But yeah, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to honor that, honor what God is doing and where he's been leading me and hold everything loosely, honestly.
That was something that's just thinking back of childhood, man. Like growing up, when people were talking about, I guess, their views on God and stuff and,
Mhm.
being judgmental towards people, I'm just like, but you're not going in these spaces and letting these people see your light.
Right. Right.
It's like, what are you doing in here having conversations with everybody else who for the most part think and look
Yeah.
like you? You're not going out there. What you're doing is you're looking like you think you're better than everybody else, but you need to go in these spaces and you need to expose these people to your light.
Yeah.
Your light is supposed to shine in darkness,
Yep.
not amongst other lights.
Yeah.
That was just always something I thought about.
Right. Right. And we're just sitting there fighting each other, fighting over nonsense. Too many people are sitting on the sidelines of life, screaming into the game of life and not even actually involved in life. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I'm tired of it.
Hey.
I'm tired of people using my faith to do damage.
Oh
Right.
man, and we could have a whole podcast episode
Yeah.
about that. That's sickening to me too. That dog, man.
Yeah.
And that leads to back to what we were saying earlier, is just about like with the lies with a little bit of truth. Like if people don't have hope and then you could offer them just a little bit of hope
Yeah.
and you can twist that and turn it
People will.
into something for your benefit.
Yeah. People will and people are doing that.
I
Right.
always think about the Book of Eli, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
movie. He knew
Yeah.
the power of the written word,
Yeah.
and he knew, what was in it. But his whole idea about, and spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen it,
Yeah. Right.
his whole idea for wanting that book was so
Yeah.
he could control people, not
Just
so he could set people free, so he can
mhm.
control them.
Control. Back to freedom, right?
Back to freedom.
Yeah, man. There's a world out there trying to keep you held hostage, man, and in bondage.
Yeah, yeah. But we're doing our part, man. We're
Yeah.
doing our part. Yeah, man. I appreciate you and what you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to come on here and converse with me and share some insight on the things you've been doing.
Yeah.
Um, before I let you get out of here, let the people know how they can get in contact with you, how they can support anything you're doing, purchase your book, anything you
Yeah.
want to share.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so you can find me especially a lot of my advocacy kind of work is at Tethered Words, and that's WRDS. So at Tethered Words. And then if you want only poetry, then it's Tethered Words Poetry. So both of those are on Instagram.
Mm,
Um, tetheredwords.com is the blog, and you can also find the book on there. Um, And yeah, you just hit me up, tethered words poetry for at gmail.com. That's me, man. I want my words to be tethered to something eternal, to something more, to draw you in, right? To set you free, all that kind of stuff. So, but hit me up. Love to have a conversation.
I have the information in the show notes, so everybody, make sure you tap in with Will, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownsugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.